What? You're like just pointing.
My drink's all the way down there. I left it down there. It says we're supposed to introduce ourselves.
Oh, we are?
Yeah, apparently.
Okay, well, let's do that.
It says introduce us themselves.
Well, I'm Pierce. I'm on the vscode team.
And I'm Burke. And I'm also on the vscode team. And we are in Huntsville, Alabama.
Yeah.
And we're going to chat a little bit about what we've done this past year
Yeah.
with Visual Studio Code and Copilot and AI and all those things, because it's been a heck of a year.
That it has. All right, let's jump in.
Let's start with, let's roll the clock back. I was thinking on the way up here, it's the 19th, 18th last year, December, we released Copilot Free, which in my mind is like the moment that everything really started to accelerate and amp up for us.
Yeah.
Right about this time last year.
Right around this time last year. Yeah, like normally at Microsoft, December is a pretty slow time, right? People are getting ready for the holidays.
Nobody's around.
This time last year, we were shipping Copilot Free.
That's right.
Which is kind of insane that was a year ago. But yeah, I mean, I agree. That was like the first big announcement. We had Universe last October where we announced like we support multiple model providers now, not just OpenAI models. So we had Anthropic. We also had Gemini.
That's right. I remember. Yep. That's right. We had
that. We had Copilot edits. There was a couple big moments at Universe, and then there was kind of like a little bit of a pause while we kind of like collected ourselves and actually got all that out the door. And there was like Copilot Free in December, and then that kind of like set the tone for the rest of the year.
Yes, it did. And so coming off of, so we did Copilot Free in December, and then we came back in January and we shipped almost immediately.
Yeah.
So early February, we shipped two sort of big things. The first one was Copilot Edits GA, which we had previewed, I think, at Universe in October. Yeah. So literally 3 months later, we GA'd it, which GA means it's like a Microsoft terminology for it's ready.
Yeah.
That's all it means. And then the other thing was next edit suggestions. Yeah. So let's talk about edits a little bit.
Yeah. So edits basically was, for me, the moment when it was kind of in some ways an evolution of how I already was using AI to build apps, right? Like I would go to something like ChatGPT or Chat inside of VS Code. I would say like, how do I do this? I would get a code snippet and then I would paste it back into my code. It's crazy. We're at this place a year ago.
Yeah. There we have little buttons in there. It was that insert into file.
Insert into file. And it was in many ways a very profound shift, even though it seemed subtle at the time, which was like, I used to always go to the editor as my first way of like, I am imparting my thoughts onto how this solution should work. And that was like a change of like, no, now I'm literally prompting. And this is how I'm starting to build applications. Now, at that time, it was very simple things, right? Like Copilot edits, you had to reference specific files. It wasn't looking across your whole project automatically.
Very contained.
Very like, and even I remember then people were like, oh, this might be a little radical. Or
yeah,
like,
you must
that was the vibe.
We've gone too far.
But that was like, at the time, like that was very cutting edge and was a sign of things to come. But it was kind of a big shift in how we build applications. So yeah, I remember I was on paternity leave at that time and started trying edits, and I was like, oh man, this is pretty magical.
I used it over Christmas break last year, and I was impressed. I built like a small website. I think I redesigned my blog, but it's pretty limited.
It's definitely limited, yeah.
And so I was thinking, and this is around the time that people were like, well, AI is going to take everybody's jobs in 6 months. And I was like,
I can't even do that.
I was like, there's no way. The only way you'd say that is if you've never used these tools. But another really important tool that came out, which was more along the lines of what made Copilot famous to begin with. I mean, what Copilot really pioneered was ghost text.
Yep.
And then the next evolution of that was next edit suggestions, was also dropped in early Feb.
Yeah, that's right. So like, if like the ghost text code completions in the editor is like finishing your current thought. Okay, I start typing a line of code and our comment and the AI guesses what the rest of what I'm trying to type is and completes that thought. Like NES is really thinking about, okay, based off what you're doing now and the context of this file, what is the next thing after the thing you're doing now that you want to do? So, okay, I have an idea of what that is. Where in the file would I actually need to place that edit? And then what would the content of that edit be? And so that was also a pretty big moment in like how I actually partner with AI within the editor itself. Because at that point, I was still living very much, although I was using things like edits, I was still very like the editor was my primary driver as my flow.
Code first. Which I think at that time, I think it's changed now, but I think at that time you had two camps of people. Some people are like, I'll never use AI.
That's right.
And then some people are like, I'm using it. And most of those people are mostly using completions. I think today, We may still have some holdouts that people are like, I don't use AI at all, but you have two camps. You have people who use completions and next edit suggestions.
Right.
Completions being about writing code you haven't written yet.
Yeah.
Next edit suggestions about editing code that you already have written without you even asking for that edit based on some other change you made. And then, well, we're moving like along the spectrum. Then you have edits, and then what comes after that, and what came after that was the same month.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember this.
Yeah.
This is late February.
Month.
We previewed agent mode.
That's right. Yeah.
So we GA'd edits in early Feb.
Yeah.
Can that be right?
That is right. Yeah.
And we previewed agent mode at the end of the month.
Yeah. Yeah. So agent mode was kind of like, it's kind of like you follow the same thread of like, okay, if I'm using natural language, it's looking at files I specify. Okay, how could the agent look at all of my files? How could it do other things that are not just editing? Right? That's kind of essentially what the agent is. It is very fancy, but at the same time, it's quite simple. It's, okay, you have a prompt. You tell in that prompt, this is what I want you to do. This is what the user is asking. And here is a set of tools you have access to that you can do other things. The AI can say, I want to use these tools to do certain things, like search your code base. It returns that back to us. We have programmatic things we've written in client inside of vscode to go search your code base, right? And then, okay, we get out edits from that, and then we pass that back to the agent. It's just a loop, right?
Right.
And now it can choose the next action based off the context it has. And so, like, from that perspective, it's like quite simple, but it was another one of these kind of profound moments of like, I don't even think we necessarily realized how big it was at the time and how much it would change everything when we introduced agent mode.
I mean, I was super skeptical about it.
Yeah.
Just because that just seemed like a terrible idea right off the rip. Because remember the models that we had back then too. I think we had, what were the models? We had some 4.1,
maybe 4.1, 4.0, Sonnet 3.5, maybe question mark around that time.
I don't remember, but I do remember just thinking like these models can write code, but the code is not great, and I don't know if this is a great idea. Yeah. Just being honest, that was my thinking around agent mode. But that was not the only thing we released at the end of February, which was huge.
Yeah.
Because now we have this autonomous thing that can actually do very complex tasks.
Yeah.
Check its output, auto heal.
Yeah.
Right. But then we GA'd custom instructions, which that's another thing that feels like it's been around forever, but I guess it's not. Late February was custom instructions and also terminal suggestions. We've done a lot of work on terminal. We should talk about that in a minute, but custom instructions.
Yeah, I think, well, custom instructions were already in the product, but they really, in my opinion, became way more important with the agent, right? Because you want AI to work how you and your team work. And at least with the editor, you're still kind of, not that you're not in control with the agent, but you're literally dictating every single line of code that's happening, right? And so you have a lot more opportunity for intervention. And I think as you the way you partner with AI shifts with the agent, it's very critical that it works in the same way you and your team do. And so instructions, again, a very simple concept. It's basically a prompt that you attach to every other prompt. That's on like some additional context you want the AI to know. But I mean, we see in practice, like we have offline evals and things like that, even very simplistic instructions of like, this is what type of project it is. Here is the layout. It can improve the output of the code that you get from the models. And it also can improve the latency of the overall time it takes to get back what you want. Because if you're telling the AI hints, basically, well, it may be able to figure it out just with grep, right? Or but if you're telling it to look here, like, then it's going to look much quicker, right?
So, yeah. Even stuff as simple as this is how you start the project in dev mode.
Yeah.
It can figure that out.
Yeah.
But that's less work it has to do. Faster agent turns, more accurate agent
And as you're using this over many, many, many hours, days, weeks, months, right? And also, I think another critical thing with all the customization features is I think we all, on every team, even extremely AI first teams like ours, there's a spectrum of like how advanced people are in their partnership with AI. And I think the really cool thing about things like instructions is it's a way for you to basically skill like your entire team up on how to use this thing, because you don't have to be a prompt master, right? You can help to bake some of those things into the default
The person who likes to do that can do that. And people who don't want to write prompts.
Or the person on your team who knows, even if everyone knew great about AI, there's probably a couple people on your team who are like, I'm the one person on this team who understands how this whole system works. Like documenting that in once and putting it in your instructions, like it's not even just you're scaling yourself and the agent, you're scaling every single person in that repository because that instruction lives in your repo about how to partner with AI. And you're just up-leveling your entire team.
Yeah.
So it's very simple, but also very profound.
Okay, so that wraps up February, and then early March.
Yep.
MCP.
MCP.
Which was huge. And that lands in agent mode. Actually, a ton of stuff happens in March. Let's start with MCP because that's like a huge moment just in the industry in general.
Yeah, so, I kind of introduced this concept of tools, and those were all things that we had kind of built into VS Code. And at that point, we had fewer tools, but we had like code-based search, making edits, those sorts, checking the linter for errors, right? Those sorts of things all existed. But it was kind of obvious at that point that there was things you wanted to do, and it was like, really, are we going to have to bake every single one of these into VS Code? To the point about making the agent work like you and your team do. And so while there had been kind of some attempts, like there had been plugins from ChatGPT, there had been some other kind of initiatives like this. MCP was really the first one that leaned into kind of the agentic workflow. And really, like, again, something that was big at the time, but even in retrospect is bigger now, which is basically like you can make the agent do whatever you want by bringing these additional tools.
Right.
And letting the agent basically decide to use those tools. So like I know every single project I'm working on, I'm using the GitHub MCP. I'm using Playwright, right? Like Chrome DevTools MCP.
That's a good one.
There's a couple ones that I'm just using on pretty much every project I'm working on.
I use Context 7.
Context 7 for adding more context, right? So yeah, like I think even if we were shipping a ridiculous amount of things that the agent could do as a built-in thing, there would always be a long tail of tasks that weren't possible. And so MCP really unlocks that by allowing you to bring your own tools to the agent.
Yeah, that was huge. And then the other thing we released in March that was huge, which a lot of people still don't know about today, is BYOK, or bring your own key.
Yes.
Which essentially means you can use your own model, local. Maybe it's a Google model, maybe it's Open Router, maybe it's our friends at Cerebras, right?
Yep. Yeah. So like, there was a couple people who were like, I just want, chat to talk directly to my imprints. And so that was kind of a common customer request around that time. But then there were still kind of like big model players, but you were starting to see more models, like this long tail of either open source or other models kind of come out on the market. And it was like, we wanted people to be able to use those in Copilot, but obviously there's real engineering work to bring those things into Copilot itself. Right. It's make them good, right? Because it's not just like, oh, the model is an API. We call that in Copilot. Yeah. There's a lot of work that goes into shipping great models in the product. We can't do that. So the way we support this long tail is bring your own key. And so to this day, like, sometimes when like one of these big new models drops, the open source models, DeepSeek, whatever it may be, I'm in bring your own key. I'm trying to see how's this thing work with agent mode and what's the results get. Because also the benchmarks can be a little gamey, right? So like you don't always know until you try. And so bring your own key is a very popular feature. And it's not even just for individuals. We're starting to see a lot more teams using it.
Yeah, I hear it a lot. People are always like, I want to use my own model with Copilot. You can. You can. It's just go to your model picker and then what is it, manage models?
Manage models, and then there's a whole configuration experience. I mean, there's a lot of people who like are in very specialized domains who are fine-tuning their a model over their code base. Like they have their own domain specific language or whatever. Yeah. Great. Use that in Copilot. Bring your own key.
2 more things in March.
Yeah.
This could take forever.
Dude, this is going to be an hour-and-a-half podcast. Sorry.
Chat modes. Chat modes showed up, which are now called custom agents, but chat modes.
Yes. Yeah, so we noticed that there was like workflows that people would try to use the agent for. And again, to the point about like, you could just prompt this every single time. It's not very ergonomic to do that. And also scaling the best practices across how you and your team work. Like we really needed a good way to kind of formalize that. And so we created this chat mode, which is unlike a prompt. We'll get to prompt files in a second, but like it's more of a persistent kind of way of working. It's not like a specific one-time action, which is more of a prompt. And so like that could be I'm doing security work. That could be I'm doing code review. And people were basically creating chat modes for each of these things. And that was kind of another big customiz. Like we introduced agent mode, then we started adding, okay, now you can customize tools. Okay, now you can add custom instructions. Okay, now you can add modes. And so we're starting to layer on more functionality onto that base agent as we go through the year.
Yeah, people always ask, what is the difference between custom instructions and prompt files and custom agents or custom modes? And the answer is it's just different ways to build workflows, right? Yeah. They're all just different ways of adding additional instructions to the agent.
That's right.
They're all essentially doing very similar things, but they have different use cases. Yeah. And so we're just trying to provide you with all the building blocks that you need to build your AI workflow. Okay. So we had chat modes and then notebook editing.
Notebook editing. So like, as a developer, before joining VS Code, like we all have our language stacks we live in. And for me, at the time I was living much less kind of in the data science world, much more now. But like I didn't realize how many people are doing data science in VS Code. It is a ridiculous number of people.
It's a lot. Yeah.
And so Jupyter notebooks are obviously like the foundational element in this space. And so um, we basically made it such that the agent can do agentic data science with Jupyter notebooks. So you can basically say like, I want you to do this, explore this, add a graph for this. And, you know, it can modify the notebook and the cells and look at the output of the cells, very similar to actual code and the outputs of code, to basically build out notebooks. And this is how like how the VS Code team works. We have a ton of Jupyter notebooks for different things, like
That's true.
bug triage. That is literally a Jupyter notebook that has been written by AI.
It's a
over APIs.
GitHub issues notebook, right?
It's a GitHub issues notebook.
Yeah.
I have, you know,
people don't know you can do that.
They don't know you can do that. And there's, even if you're using something like Azure Monitor or things like that, there's really cool things you can do with like telemetry. You can be like, oh, I really wish like we could pivot this with this, and you're like, I don't know the syntax of Kusto, like please help me figure this out.
AI is so
with like data analysis task. Now literally you can just be like, I need to figure this out, please help me. And if you give it the right context, it can do that.
Now this gets us through. We're only to March. We're 3 months in.
We made it 1/4 of the.
I probably have
30-minute
reliving. Yeah. All right. That was March. So let's talk about April. In April, we get sort of two big things: prompt files or reusable prompts, and multi-window support for chat editors. So I'll start with prompt files.
So I this is one I have regrets about in a way that maybe you're not going to anticipate, which is I wish we called them slash commands, because that's actually how you use them in the product. And like the amount of people who are like, why can't I do slash commands? And you're like, you literally can.
You can. Yeah.
But essentially, I mean, it does describe what it is. It is literally a file that contains a prompt, and you can invoke it with a slash command. There's also a little play icon. And similar to the modes, you see people kind of doing these workflows again and again, and it's annoying having to type that every time. Make it a prompt file. Now everyone on your team can go and do that.
Yeah, the other one that gets me is when people are like, I want to be able to attach like context. Like it's like, you can just use the hash symbol and you can attach anything, but they're looking for the @ symbol.
A little inside baseball, like we actually discussed this exact one in our UX call this last week, because I was like, I feel like every editor but us has kind of converged on the ad, and we're like holding out with the hashtag.
This is one of the maybe the downsides of doing these first is that people standardize on other things. But let's talk about multi-window support. Because USB chat was confined to the sidebars.
That's right.
And then we made it so you could use it in the, you could pop them out into the editors.
Yeah, so we saw people starting to experiment more with like, I'm not always partnering 100% synchronously with the agent. I want to fire off multiple tasks at once. I want to be looking into multiple things at once. So that was kind of like the first moment where that was really starting to become a thing. And so it's like, well, why would you ever need to pop something out? I'm always staring at the agent while it works. It's like, well, no, like now I'm starting to kind of delegate a little bit more. So you start to see the delegation workflow starting to come more into the product with this.
Yeah, definitely. So that brings us through April.
Yep.
And so then we hit May.
Yep.
And in May, let's see here. There's so much. I mean, this is where it really starts to just kind of blow out. So we have the MCP auth was implemented, which prior to that, I don't think there was built-in auth. It was basically just like,
yeah, it was very YOLO.
Spin the thing up. Yeah, there was a lot of YOLOing this year.
But that was good, because then like it could reach into systems that required authentication, and you could do so securely. So that opened up a whole new generation of tools that you could bring in.
Which was really nice, right? Because before, like the GitHub NCP server would run locally.
Yep.
And then now it runs via URL.
Yeah,
and
got
auth, and it uses, and shout out to Tyler for all his work on auth.
Yeah, great job.
Tools are grouped and managed. So we were improving the grouping of tools in the tool picker for MCP.
Started adding more and more tools, right? Like it wasn't a problem before because we didn't have that many tools. And now you got MCP, you got basically a tool for every surface inside of VS Code.
Correct.
It gets a little unmanageable, so we had to clean it up.
Got unwieldy quickly. And then the cloud agent shows up. Is that right, Nate?
That's right. Yeah, that was one of the big Microsoft build announcements last year.
That's right.
Yeah, so that was a big one, because it was like, okay, now like going back to the like, how do I partner with this thing? It was all synchronous. Then it was like kind of synchronous and local. And then this was like the first time you really have like, I'm going to kick something off. It may not be perfect, right? But it's getting an initial stab at what I want to do. And that's happening in the background. Then I'm pulling that into VS Code and doing more work on it. And that was like another big workflow shift for me, where I was like starting to kick off way more cloud tasks, like way more cloud tasks. And to the point that that's now actually my primary workflow.
Yeah, oh, really? You're a big fan of the cloud agent?
I am like overwhelmingly, we'll get to planning in a second, but I'll plan stuff. I'll be like, I am happy with this because I want to agree on the plan up front. Then I kick to the agent and I'm just letting that thing cook. And then it's not that I think it's like, okay, I'm gonna merge this right away. It's like, okay, well, that thing's literally doing stuff while I'm doing other things. I'm parallelizing myself. And then I'm pulling it into VS Code. And sometimes that needs tweaks or last mile work. I'm doing that inside of VS Code. And that's kind of like now how I'm partnering with agents inside of the product. And so this was like the first moment where that started to kind of become a thing.
Yeah, I remember that. And one of the things about the cloud agent that, because I do remember doing this at Build with the demos that we built, was the how it's worked into the PR workflow. So it just follows the natural Git workflow, which is already there, which I thought was great.
Yep.
And then I learned from you sort of the value of delegating things to the cloud agent and being like, you know, at the time I would be like, redesign this landing page. Give me 10 different designs. I want 10. And then I'll just pick the one that I want, right? So I would open like, or you give me 10, or I would just be firing off a bunch of PRs and I would just close the ones I didn't want and keep the ones I did, which is called abundance. I started doing a lot more of
abundance is really like, I mean, it's kind of like a buzzword, but like I really do think that AI enables abundance. And you really, a lot of teams that I talk to are still very much, I call it AI 1.0, of like, I used to do X thing. We can speed it up with AI and Y way. But actually, like yes, you should do that, right? But then the really cool thing is like to the variance idea of like, I don't have to like be like, oh, I don't like this design and keep iterating, just give me 10 designs and like I'll pick the one that works best.
Right. Yeah.
That is a workflow that was never practical for you to do before. I mean, is now possible.
I think it just feels really wasteful to everyone, right? Like even the other night I did a refactor and the thing like I think it did 4,000 something lines and I wasn't happy with the refactor. I just threw the whole thing away. Yeah. And the fact that someone would write 4,000 lines of code that would just be thrown away just feels morally wrong.
Yeah.
But that's not the world we live in anymore.
It's not. Yeah. And I think it's actually, the workflow you're talking about is very interesting because now with AI, I used to do this thing where like I would prompt, okay, maybe I don't have the best prompt. It's not the most specified. And it doesn't quite give me what I want. And then you kind of do this thing where you just like keep kind of prodding it to get what you want. I don't even do that anymore. I'm very much like, if I don't get what I want, for the most part, right?
Start it over.
Yeah. It is almost always actually cheaper. It doesn't feel this way, right? It feels very like, oh, I just wasted my time. But it's actually cheaper from your time perspective to go back, just reprompt with a stronger prompt. That's actually
just do it again.
Do it again. But now with the background agent, you can basically do that process, but in the background at scale. Right
now, what I don't do that, but what I will do is sometimes like if I see it going and I'm like, oh no, I forgot to tell it something, I'll stop and I'll say, I'm gonna stop you right there.
Yep.
And then I'll provide the extra context and then just let it continue on.
Yep.
And it seems to do just fine with that. Now, that was Cloud Agent. May build tools are grouped and managed, but we made another huge announcement in May.
Yeah.
That didn't actually drop until June, but it was a huge announcement at Build.
Copilot Chat is open source.
Open source. We open source it.
We open source GitHub Copilot. Yeah, and I mean, I think we talked a little bit about this, but this is the insider's pod, so I'll let you inside. Like, I think it was always very, you know, everyone who works on VS Code believes deeply in open source and working in the open. And I think it was always kind of a bit of a contradiction for us that like, it's like, okay, yeah, VS Code is open source, but like our work around Copilot isn't. And that was increasingly becoming more and more of what we're spending time on, because that was the area where everything is changing as a developer. So we obviously spend our time there. And I think like it was kind of eating at us, right? Because we're all people who really believe in open source. And so I think separate from, you know, all the other benefits we highlight in our blog post, it's like, I think for our team, just as people and like the values we have, we wanted to be working in the open. And so it's like a huge moment for us that we brought it up. It felt right when we finally were able to be like, this is what we're working on. This is how we work. And I know also for me, like I always see you and I both are like always getting looped into like internet conspiracies about GitHub Copilot, but it's cool for me because
it's basically our full-time
It's our full-time job responding to conspiracy theories. But like, it is cool that like when someone's like, oh, I bet they're prompting it to do this crazy thing. It's like, well, literally you can go in and you can see exactly how the product works, and it's all out there, and that's good and bad, right? But like, that's the value system that we want to work in, and that we believe made VS Code successful. And that's what we think will make Copilot Chat successful, is working in the open with all of you in the community to make this thing a success.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So that was super exciting. It was huge for the team. It was a very energizing moment for everyone because it felt like we were returning to what we do.
Yeah,
right.
It's a return to roots moment.
Return to roots. Yeah, exactly. Now, the other thing that we got in June was so Daniel, who works on the terminal, his favorite thing, auto approving terminal commands. Just not Daniel's favorite. Daniel doesn't like this at all, I don't think. This idea that you can have the terminal, you just say auto approve and it will just execute things in the terminal, without bothering you. Daniel wants you to be safe and has put an allow list that he would please like you to use.
Yeah, I think it's like one of those things of like, we've been talking about a lot about how we work shifts and like some of our assumptions and like what we're comfortable with and what we're not. And it depends a lot for me on like what I'm working on specifically. Like my comfort level doing things like YOLO mode on my personal project that's backed by Git and all this other stuff on my personal computer. I'm just like, I am actually very comfortable with that idea. But there's other projects where it's like, I think I should be more careful. And I think especially if you have tools that touch your infrastructure, that's where things can really go awry, right? Because then it's like, oh, well, you see those Twitter threads. This didn't happen with GitHub Copilot. It's like, deleted my database. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, when you're moving into this, I just trust it to do its thing kind of environment, that's a risk you take, right? So yeah, like it's also kind of starting to highlight the security of these workflows and how different people are thinking about different parts of how we secure the agent. And I think for us, it was always, and still to this day is, we want to keep you in the loop as a default. And we want you to be in control of what happens on your machine. You're the developer, you know best. And so that is reflected in our defaults. Auto approve is still not on by default, which a lot of people complain about and think we don't have as a result.
It's still there.
I think actually the way we solve this, which we're working on now, is sandboxing, right? Like sandboxing the terminal commands so they can't do.
Which, by the way, you can do this today in code spaces. If you use GitHub code spaces, you are sandboxed. In fact, I believe it's a relatively safe place for you to turn on auto approve and do YOLO. I don't think many bad things can happen.
Burke and I are not security experts, but I feel pretty confident. You're running in a container.
We cannot give financial advice, but you are in a container. That's the ideal environment. The other thing that we got was delegating to the cloud agent from Visual Studio Code, which we had the ability to. I don't think you could start a cloud agent session, but you could interact with it once you started it on GitHub. But then now you could just like take a chat session from VS Code and delegate it to the cloud.
That's right. I mean, and as a developer, I live in VS Code, and not that I have any problems going to github.com, but like it's just good to keep me in the flow, and that was a nice improvement there.
That was huge. Now, what month do you think we're at? By the way,
are we to December yet?
No, it's July. It's July. And by the way, this is such a reflection, like all this stuff is a reflection of how many hours the engineering team has put into this, and how just incredible it was, the velocity at which they've been able to ship. Because remember, they're still building core editor features at the same time. And
across multiple platforms. And like there's other products building on top of VS Code and choosing us as a foundation. Like all of that is real engineering work that has to happen from our team.
So like one of the things that we shipped in July that's a really good example of this, that enables a lot in other editors that build on top of us, is Worktrees support. So like we shipped Worktrees support in Visual Studio Code, which enables the background agents that we have today. Exactly, in that whole ecosystem. But also chat checkpoints and rollbacks, I use this all the time.
Same.
Huge. I think Justin worked on this.
Yeah, Justin from our engineering team worked on this. Like we had kind of this like undo redo, but it was getting kind of messy because it would undo like literally the last thing the LLM did. But like you're getting to the point now where the agent can work for more than like 30 seconds at a time, right? It can work for minutes, even tens of minutes, and in some cases much longer. And so like it's like, oh well, just spamming the undo button was getting unwieldy. But this is actually using Git behind the scenes. It's creating like basically a ton of stashes of your code.
It works so well. I use checkpoints all the time, or just going up and editing the message, and then when you edit it and send it, it's like, hey, everything from this point on is going to get blown away. Are you cool with that? I'm like, yep, it's totally fine. Huge quality of life improvement. Connor with the virtual tool sets, which was also huge. Connor works on the MCP tools. Virtual tools, because before, like you said, you'd have all these MCP tools. I think GitHub alone had 80 something tools, and the limit for passing these tools is 128th to these models. And so we would have to say, you'd try to send a chat, it would be like, you have more than 128 tools, select to try again. And so they introduced virtual tool sets.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, there was some improvements to basically like, continuing this theme of, okay, I have more and more tools. How do we manage this? And there's like a UX challenge there of like, okay, it's kind of unwieldy, like having to go and uncheck. I'm okay with these GitHub things and I'm okay with these Azure things, but then like you start a new chat and it's not there anymore. And like, so fixing that problem, but also like kind of starting to think more about how do we solve this like problem of 128 tool limit in a world where you're working with more and more tools and you don't want people to have to manually go in and check all the
Very
tools
tedious every single time. Yeah. No, this time around I won't play right. August, auto mode, AgentsMD, and migrating Worktrees. I think auto mode and AgentsMD probably the two biggest things here. Thoughts?
Yeah, so at this point, we're starting to ship multiple models every single month from all the providers. It's getting overwhelming. And so we were hearing a lot of feedback like, can you just help us to pick a better model? And so we introduced auto mode, which is like still something that's very much a work in progress and we're trying to make better every single month. But we basically looked at some of the top performing models in our product and we said, okay, like, can we look at that and also which models tend to be fastest and have the lowest amount of problems infrastructure wise? Put those in there with a defined model mix and essentially like route to the best set of models within the product. And so this was kind of the initial inspiration for auto mode. You get a 10% discount if you use this thing on your premium request, which is super cool. And kind of in the future, the way this is going is like, imagine you say, update this markdown file to have this text, right? You don't need Opus for that. As much as Burke might want to like inflate his like usage just by using Opus for this, show your boss you're using more AI. It's not very efficient. It takes longer, right? You should be using a small model for that. So this is kind of the direction we're going is like, we're also taking into account task complexity, which is pretty cool. AgentsMD, like I think one really cool thing about VS Code that's maybe underappreciated is just the amount of which we've adopted these open standards this year, right?
Right.
We talked about MCP. AgentsMD is kind of the why do we have literally a markdown file in all of these products that is basically the same thing of providing custom instructions, right? And so this was us adopting that inside of the product as well.
Oh, and also shout out to David Kramer from Sentry, who was the one on Twitter who was like, hey, the instructions file situation is getting out of control. And I was like, cool, bro, could you open an issue? And he opened an issue.
Yeah.
And that issue kind of kicked that off. And so thanks, David. All right, September. This is ridiculous. Did we do all this? Unified notifications, plan mode, OpenAI Codex integration, Subagents, MCP gallery, and handling merge conflicts with AI.
Yeah, so I think plan mode was...
Sorry, hold on.
Plan...
Well, one... Go ahead.
You're killing me, man. Plan mode was like, I think, something that was already representative of how a lot of us worked, right? On the team is like we would kind of like informally do some like lightweight planning and then pass to the agent. And we found that it was really like improving the quality of outputs we get when we're building GitHub Copilot and VS Code with AI. And so it was one of those of like, it kind of just makes sense that it should be built into the product. And so that was kind of like our first real exploration into being super opinionated about like, we think this is a way that you should be partnering with AI and something that's working for us. Because I think, again, even on teams where people are very advanced with AI, you're only going to, it's like garbage in, garbage out. If you're not prompting well, you're not going to get good results. And so the planning process is really helping you to basically construct a really impressive prompt to give something like Opus, which, as you said, that's even getting powerful enough. It can go figure out stuff on its own to go and actually solve your problem. So plan mode was huge. Subagents were kind of another big one in the agent kind of space because essentially we were noticing like there's this problem of context bloat, and as the agent does more and is capable of more, it uses more context. And one of the challenges with that is as you use more context, the code quality you actually get from the agent decreases.
Right, degrades.
And there's a couple of really like kind of context heavy tasks that happen basically at the beginning of every single agent session, like gathering context. And really, there's only a subset of that context is actually necessary for what you said, right? And so Subagents is basically, could we take all that, spin a subagent from the main agent, basically do all that, return the most important stuff from that thread back to the main agent, and then basically you have this really clean, low context that you're maintaining in the main agent. And that's the goal is basically that this is going to give you way higher quality results.
Yeah, Subagents is huge. It's something that I use all the time. To the folks that interact with us on Reddit, we love you so much, and we know that you're very concerned about the context windows. We see this all the time, but it is true that larger context windows degrade model performance significantly, not just in accuracy but also in speed. And so, subagents, you should use them liberally because they they have isolated context windows and they stop that from happening, right? They, instead of having these monolithic chat threads where by the time it says summarizing chat, it's too late. But when we do summarize chat, we also replace your chat history with that summary. So we are kind of resetting the content. The MCP gallery was huge. This is something that we did with Anthropic.
Yes.
Because we had all of these people that set up these great MCP registries. There was tons of them, and they were great. But there was a real one place to go get them. We wanted you to be able to install them from VS Code or any editor from like an extensions gallery view, which you can now do. The one we announced in October at Universe, which I was on at, a little bit of FOMO, was the OpenAI Codex integration.
Yeah. So again, it's like kind of a return to roots moment. Like VS Code and GitHub have always been a developer platform, right? Like VS Code literally is just an editor and you have to add stuff to it to get it to be whatever you want, right? GitHub also has a very extensible platform. And so a kind of trend we were noticing is like people were really enjoying using multiple agent harnesses. There's certain agents that are better at certain things. And so at that time, the Codex team we were talking with a lot, and we were like, it'd be really cool to have Codex inside of VS Code, one, and natively integrated. So that was kind of like the first talking point. But then also a trend we were seeing is like people want to experiment with multiple agents, but they still want kind of that centralized observability, metrics, all that you get from GitHub Platform and GitHub Copilot, and without having to have like 40 AI subscriptions, right? Like, so that's kind of where this like concept of like Agent HQ, which we announced at GitHub Universe, came in, and also in VS Code, the Codex integration, which is kind of like the main integration that highlights this today, where you can sign into OpenAI's Codex agent, not GitHub Copilot, but with your GitHub Copilot subscription, and use that inside of VS Code as a natively integrated thing.
No new subscription required.
No new subscription required. And so this is super cool because like now like basically GitHub Copilot becomes like your AI dev tool subscription, and you can go and try out, of course, the built-in AI experiences we have in the product, but also agents like Codex.
Yeah, you get to use the agent that you want. And then in November, so coming right off of that, we had background agents, which was built on the Worktrees work that was done before. So this new unified agents view where you can see local agents, cloud agents, background agents, Codex, what other, and you can even install other agents in the future. You can install other agents via extensions. You can easily delegate between agents. So you could plan locally and then hand that off to the cloud.
Exactly.
Right. You could just sort of like mid-operation there, delegate to others. And then another huge thing that we just shipped, in fact, I think we just announced it yesterday, was agent skills, or Claude skills, now called agent skills, available now in Vision Studio.
That's right. Yeah. And again, another example of us partnering with others in the industry and adopting standards. And so that's the really cool thing. If you're using VS Code and GitHub Copilot and there's standards emerging elsewhere in the ecosystem, like you will have access to those things inside of our product. So
we're going to follow those. And we can't forget a year of models: Claude, Sonnet 4 and 4.5, Opus 4 and 4.5. Can't forget the GPT-5 launch.
GPTs,
The GPTs, 5.1. Now we're at 5.2. GPT-5 Mini, GPT-5 Codex, Grok Fast 1. I mean, you worked on these model launches. I don't think people know, they don't understand what goes on behind the scenes for us to just tweet out and be like, available today.
Yeah, there's a lot of work that happens from a ton of teams across VS Code and GitHub to get these models out. It's not just literally like, oh, like we call it. I mean, in some ways it is as simple as you call an API, but it's actually not, because really by making a model available in GitHub Copilot, we want it to be a great experience. So this process starts happening weeks before we actually ship a model. We start working with our model partner friends. They say, we have a model. Here's what we're noticing about it. Here's some general guidance on how to integrate the model in terms of prompts and tools. So we start doing that. We have a whole offline evaluation suite that we run. So we're constantly trying different prompt tweaks and things like that. We're sending feedback back to the model partners. Then all of that kind of culminates in shipping the model on day one. But then there's also like a whole feedback loop that happens after, where we're running experiments. We're talking again with the model partners on like how we can make these models even better. So there's an optimization loop that happens once we have a lot more people like, yeah, like the people on Reddit, the people on X and GitHub issues who are saying, oh, I noticed this kind of like weird behavior with this model, like with GPT 5.2, it was like, it's stopping early.
Yeah,
It's like, okay.
And we love that. Like
Yeah,
when requests are failing and you're posting that to Reddit, we love that.
Yeah.
We love that because we need to know that so we can go back and look at the services, see what's happening with the upstream providers. There's a lot going on behind the scenes with these things.
Yeah, that's right. Like, but behind all these launches, there's a team of scientists working on the evals. There's people working on prompts and tools. There's infrastructure people, right? So there's a ton of folks that really make that, to your point, like that very seemingly simple tweet of like, we now have this model inside of GitHub Copilot, actually a thing. But yeah, like if you ever notice weird behaviors, that's why it's so important for you to like let us know, because a lot of these things, like even if it's not immediately obvious how you fix, I mean, they are still LLMs, right? They sometimes do weird things. Yeah. We have our model partner friends that we partner with closely, not just OpenAI, but Anthropic, Google, XAI. And all those folks are also super smart, and we put our heads together and try to figure out how to make the models awesome.
I wonder if people know that we're sort of on the phone with these folks prior to these model launches, working very closely with them to make sure that things work well for you. By the time we tweet it out, say it's in the product, it's not like we just turn a flag on in the back end. So that is essentially your wrap of the last 12 months. Let me just tell you, we're barely going to make it. The sun is now fully, I'm leaning into here. We're down. One of our mics is broke. And what an incredible year, though. I mean, intense for you, for me. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think like you called it out. Like, I just really want to highlight all of the work of everyone on the team. Like, I mean, it's like a cliche to say everyone gave 110%, but that really was how this past year was. And all of us care so much, right? Like Burke and I often will like text, and it's like sometimes it like physically like causes us problems when something is not quite right and we want something to be better. And that is the level of like care we have about this thing. And so we're all working our butts off to try and build the best product possible. I think it's reflected in just the year that VS Code and GitHub Copilot had. Like, 100%. I mean, we barely could get through this pod in a reasonable amount of time, and we cut out so many things, right? We didn't even talk about a lot of work.
Oh yeah, there's so much stuff.
We view that as like a massive reason that we were able to do all this. Like, you're constantly challenging us to think bigger, try new things, reporting issues, holding us accountable, giving us encouragement. You know, that's all super important to us, and that's what made VS Code great, and that's what we think is making GitHub Copilot great too. So I definitely want to shout out the community.
Yeah, we appreciate that. So keep those comments coming. You can find Pierce on X. Find me there. You can find us on Reddit. We're there.
Yes.
But we just want to say thank you to all those who sent us feedback, even if it was critical feedback.
Yeah.
To those who used Copilot and really enjoyed it. Those who were on this ride with us. There's so many to name. You know, some names come to mind. Like I think of Oren. I think of Eleanor. I think of Kuristan. I think of Parbaz. There's so many folks. So we just are extremely grateful for y'all. That's the reason why I think that kept us going.
It did. Yeah. I mean, not to get too personal, but like I have enormous respect for anyone working in AI. This thing will challenge you like no other. The space is moving so fast. And so, yeah, like we really appreciate the community. Like you guys are a huge reason that like keeps us going every single day. Your tweets, your Reddit threads, all of that all make its way into the VS Code Slack.
Oh, yeah,
our whole team reads those. Yeah. Like we share it good and bad. And so, yeah, like we've loved being on this journey with you over the last year, and like just reflecting on like the product change that has happened in the last year, how much better the models are. 2026 is going to be a wild ride too.
Absolutely. All right, y'all. That is a wrap for you for 2020. Is it 2025 still?
Is it? It is. Yeah.
What a year. We'll see you again next year. If we've come this far in 12 months.
Yep.
Where will we be a year from now? Thanks, y'all. Bye.
Thank you.